Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru, welcome to our next episode of Yogananda podcast. We have reached the next chapter. We are in chapter 14, and we're here with a full house today. We got Lauren, we got Priyank, we got Chris. How are you guys doing?
Good, thank you.
Nice. Yeah, so we finished chapter 13, and we're starting with an experience in cosmic consciousness, which is an exciting title. Can't wait to hear about it. I think a lot of us know that there's a big famous poem part of this chapter, and this will come a bit later. But first, how about we talk a little bit about the past chapter, the chapter 13, and summarize it a bit.
Sure, just the end of it. So we obviously the whole last chapter was about the Mukunda's trip to the Himalayas, which was in like before that he went to visit Ram Gopal Mazumdar, which became quite a journey. But the last episode we obviously discussed the very last part of that chapter where Ram Gopal Mazumdar tells young Mukunda about the story about Babaji, and which we'll find in a later chapter. And then he also asks Mukunda to go to sleep, but before sleeping he can't sleep, Mukunda, because he's seeing light everywhere. And then Ram Gopal Mazumdar kind of explains how blessed he is, and we discuss us being able to see the light or not, and little cheat codes we can find the God Talks with Arjuna for this, which we also went through. So if you haven't gone through that episode, please do. And also then after they say goodbye, Ram Gopal Mazumdar kind of gives him a little mini Samadhi, which is really nice, which is a nice precursor to what is happening here and in this chapter. And then also Mukunda undoes his mistake of not bowing to the shrine in Dharakeshwar. And he has a very beautiful description of how to visualize the divinity surrounding a linga, which I found particularly impressive. And as soon as he finishes there, he comes back, and this is where we are now, back in Sri Yukteswar's ashram.
Yeah, so Mukunda, one of the questions he asked Ram Gopal is he wanted him to show him Samadhi, so cosmic consciousness, and didn't work out. But he had all kinds of spiritual experiences, right? He was seeing light energy while he was at Ram Gopal's place. And then when he bowed at the Tarakeshwar shrine, he said he also had some kind of experience. I think he said the round shape of the lingam started becoming infinity or something like that. So he had all kinds of experiences already, but it wasn't the one thing he was looking for, Samadhi. But that's what might come in this chapter, because it has that title. So once you guys saw that title, you probably were like, okay, now it's happening, right? There has to be the pressure is building now. We are definitely onto something here, right?
Indeed. I love this chapter because in terms of my expectations of this chapter, because obviously I remember it as being this glorious description, probably more glorious than anywhere I've ever read this, the highest spiritual experience being described. But Mukunda obviously, Paramahansa Yogananda goes into such lovely detail here. And we also get to see like the before, the during, and the after in this chapter, which is going to be quite nice to analyze. Before he gets given this experience, Mukunda is kind of with Sri Yukteswar, and they have this kind of exchange of divine love, and Sri Yukteswar kind of expands his divine love after this episode of him being away, which is really nice. And then Guruji obviously describes the experience in kind of plain but poetic English. So we can discuss, we'll go through that in some detail. And then we'll also go through his poem. And so that's Paramahansa Yogananda reflecting on the divine experience of cosmic consciousness, which is obviously another translation for Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So it's an interesting translation, calling it cosmic consciousness. I will talk about the difference between that and Christ consciousness, and how Guruji has stylized the English so we can best grasp this intellectually, because I'm sure experientially not many of us are there yet. And then there's also a very nice section at the end where it kind of, Sri Yukteswar kind of allows him to carry, like, this essentially carry on with your life. And it's nice how Sri Yukteswar like ends this experience with him, so he can carry on with what he's supposed to do in this life. But one thing I'm a bit uncertain about before we start this chapter is how much in depth we should go into the description of the Samadhi poem, which we haven't the four of us haven't fully agreed upon yet, because of its how important it is for us in terms of, Guruji asked us to memorize it and things like that.
It means a lot to a lot of people, this poem, I think. And I think many devotees, they use it sometimes. I use that poem sometimes when I feel like I need some upliftment. I read the Samadhi poem and it has that power. And like you said, Priyank, a lot of devotees, they memorized it completely. And one thing that I remember when I was in India the first time, our host there, he, I think it wasn't even Guru. It wasn't even a special holiday. It was just a Thursday, which is like Guru Day. And he said on Thursdays, he just recites the poem mentally over and over again every single week. I found that pretty impressive. So it's pretty long, I guess, for memorizing, but I think it's worth it. It's one of the most beautiful poems I've ever seen. Yeah. Okay, but we're not there yet. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We are, let's go with the book, with the story. Chapter 14 starts out, and it starts out with the sentence, "I'm here, Guruji," which means he has arrived back at the hermitage. He has gone back from Ram Gopal Mazumdar's place. He's gone back to Tarakeshwar, like Priyank said, took the train back to Serampur, and now he's back there. And he says, "My shamefacedness spoke more eloquently for me."
Yeah, so, which the word shamefacedness kind of implies that he's now admitting to the reader fully that the admission of guilt. So he didn't actually get through his permission. He kind of inferred it through very loose interpretation of what Sri Yukteswar was saying.
Yeah, he took the silence as permission or something. Silence means yes. That's how I did it with my parents a few times when I was a kid. That also usually didn't work out well. Yeah, so he comes back, and what I expected the first time when I read this was that now Sri Yukteswar will maybe not punish him, but be a bit stern and try to teach him a lesson. Did you guys think the same thing? Was that an expectation? Because that's not how this goes here at all. This is he's just saying we're just gonna go to the kitchen, and it was very, very casual. And it was like Mukunda basically had never left and he's back. He doesn't make a big deal about it at all. And Mukunda is surprised by that. He was expecting to be reprimanded here. Because not only did he just go against his master's will, but he had a lot of responsibilities in the hermitage, and he was just dropping them all and leaving. And so he expected to be scolded for that. And so he asked him, he said, "Master, I must have disappointed you by my abrupt departure." And Sri Yukteswar says that it's not the case. He says, "Wrath springs only from thwarted desires. I do not expect anything from others, so their actions cannot be in opposition to wishes of mine," which is a very powerful sentence.
Yeah, it's like timeless wisdom, isn't it, for this age and any walk of life, isn't it? In terms of like keeping your own serenity and peace, because I don't know, if you're like, if you're in a workplace or something, then you obviously have expectations of others, but that same expectation will also mean that like when it's not fulfilled, then you have to like practice detachment, which is a bit harder to do, to not be so like frustrated and things like that. But no, this is quite difficult, isn't it? Even though it's so easy to say and to grasp intellectually, it's exceptionally difficult to do. It's because like the most gross form is expectations of others, but if you can expand that to like expectations of what life throws at you, expectations from God, expectations from anything. So it's like it gets deeper and deeper, but this is the most simple level. But even this is very, very difficult to do, because most of our relationships are quite transactional, be they family or like even serving at the center. When someone's in a certain position, like you have expectations of how it should be done, and if it's not done, then it causes problems, and then you get a bit of turmoil. So yeah, it's a very, very challenging one.
I feel like that's also a sentence that's often cited from Sri Yukteswar. I feel like it expresses unconditional love, but he expresses it in a very scientific way, not in the hard kind of way. He says like, I do not expect anything from others, so their actions cannot be in opposition to wishes of mine. So that it doesn't sound like he's pouring love over you, but his forgiveness is doing that. I feel like letting go of this, I don't know, almost a right to reprimand is I feel like an expression of love. And I thought of this when I was like doing something wrong when I lived at my parents. Oftentimes it would be I came home way later than they said I should, and then it was either my dad was home or my mom was home, and I was always hoping my mom would be home and not my dad, because my mom would be much nicer about it. I don't know if you guys felt the same there, because I feel like the fatherly aspect of love is more like the discipline, and the motherly one is more like the love. And Guruji writes about this in the Divine Romance, the difference between motherly and fatherly love. And I feel like in this instance, Sri Yukteswar is showing motherly love to Mukunda. And there's a section that we could read out about it. Chris, are you okay to read the first section there?
And I can say, as a boy who got into much trouble, I firmly agree with this experience. Experience I share, Mike. Okay, the reading. Motherly love is based on feeling, and is unconditional. Motherly love is unconditional motherly love is broader. It is based on feeling rather than on reason. True mother love is unconditional. We can say that in many ways it is more spiritual and therefore greater than most human expressions of love. God implanted in the heart of his mother a love for the child that is unconditional, regardless of the child's merit or behavior.
Even if the child in later life becomes a murderer, the mother's love remains steady, unchanged, whereas the father's may be more impatient and less inclined to forgive. The unconditional love of the mother is perhaps the human love closest to the perfection of God's love. The true mother forgives her son even when no one else will. That kind of love exemplifies God's love. He forgives his children, no matter what sins they have committed.
Now, who could have placed this love in the mother's heart, save God? In true maternal love, God gives us distinct proof that he loves us unconditionally, no matter how wicked we are or how many times we have sinned.
There's some strong examples here. I don't think Mukunda has really sinned in a big way here, but it's the motherly aspect is still what I was focusing on, the one where he's not feeling he needs to reprimand, but he needs to like welcome his child home, basically. And that's something that stood out to me. And I find that interesting with the saints. They play both roles. They're not always just one aspect of God or of love, but they can switch between them very easily.
You know, when I left my parents' house, I was 18. I went to Belfast to study, university there. Belfast isn't that far away from where I live. It's 50 miles, but you would only return at the weekends, if you returned at the weekends at all. And of course, you always returned with a whole bag of laundry. I went to London after that and returned home to Northern Ireland less. But every time when I was traveling and doing different bits and pieces, my mum would always kind of rush to the door and sort of throw her arms around me and joke about how the prodigal son returns. You know, like there he's traveling around, but he always comes back. And now that I'm a bit older, you know, I appreciate it at the time, but I think it's matured and it's gotten finer as time has gone on. I've appreciated it more. That the sacrifice that she made to sort of let me go, as it were, to then welcome me with all the love that she had. I appreciate that so much more now. I can see the sacrifice that she makes, and it's something similar to what we're reading. You know, I'm sure Sri Yukteswar just has this unconditional expression of love, and Guruji's, I'm sure, unboundedly grateful to see it.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Because I feel like Sri Yukteswar, he's an avatar, but he's also like the human aspect of Sri Yukteswar would probably miss Mukunda, right? And be happy that he's back, right? There's all those emotions going on that he's not following. Instead, he's following the wisdom. And then he says the last sentence, he finishes off with, "I would not use you for my own ends. I'm happy only in your own true happiness." So that's kind of the definition of unconditional love, I would say.
Also, it's quite a difficult like philosophy to have as a head of an ashram, but obviously this is something that we have to remind ourselves within this life, that this is all training, right? In the sense that even though he's head of the ashram, the most important thing is developing the disciples, right? Not like how well the ashram succeeds. So this is, I think, the difference between like a sadguru versus just a regular teacher, or like a swami that's in charge of an ashram. Like, for example, you can imagine, you know, in the previous ashram that Mukunda was in, Swami Dayananda, and in the you know, the boys that were in charge and his supervisor, they all had like quite heavy expectations from him, didn't they? And they did want to use Mukunda for their own ends, and they were very disappointed on him and called him like a leech and stuff like that. So like, but it's Sri Yukteswar's ashram, there's like the complete 180 flip, isn't it? It's the most purest example of leadership, essentially.
Yeah, 100%. I do also think when you reprimand someone, imagine you're a father now, you feel like you need to do it because you want to put down rules and they will benefit your son at the end of the day, right? You're not doing this because you are an erratic kind of person that just wants to be mean. You're doing it for a reason, right? And I feel Sri Yukteswar here also has the intuition that Guruji already went through some experiences there and learned something, and a reprimand is not really necessary. I don't know if you guys would agree there, but I feel that Guruji has already learned what he needed to learn from this journey. So when he came home, he was just happy to be back in the ashram, and he actually knew now the value of the hermitage life that maybe before he wasn't so 100% convinced about.
That would be true for an omniscient I, such as Sri Yukteswar. But if you, Mike, were in charge of this ashram, or sorry, let's say if I was in charge of, if I was in charge of the ashram, I would not know like that Mukunda has learned what he needs to learn. So I would have to say what needs to be said. But then I'm not Sri Yukteswar.
I think in part it reminds me of how we in the SRF act. Like, we don't go out and try to petition people to join SRF. We don't shout about it. You know, it's quite the opposite. We try to lead by example, in a sense. And really, this might be no different, where you have to have willpower to go along the spiritual path. And if you don't have that willpower, you're not committed, it's not your own choice, it's somebody else's, then you're going to fall by the wayside. So essentially, that is the commitment. As you said, Mike, you know, he chose to come back. Like, that's everything. So there's so much joy to be had in that. Like, wow, you know, you did return. So let's continue. It's kind of all forgiven, because the goal is self-realization.
So that happened sometimes in my life as well, especially with my dad. Sometimes I did something bad and he didn't choose to reprimand me, but we just went on. And you know what I never did in those cases? I never asked him, why don't you reprimand me? But that's what Mukunda is doing here. He's maybe not asking to be punished, but he's telling him how he admires the love that he's being shown here by his guru. And he says a father does not easily forgive his son if he leaves the parent's business without warning. And yet you don't show the slightest vexation. So he's surprised by this. And he points it out to Sri Yukteswar. And this is where you see that they are guru and disciple, and father and son is a bit akin to that, but also they are also two avatars, right? So they both know everything already, and they've both played this role in previous lives, right? And now they look at each other with shiny eyes, where tears were shining in their eyes, is what the sentence is. So it's kind of a moment where they kind of feel love for each other. I think that's a pretty, like, when I read this, it made me very happy.
Yeah, and that the tears are very, very beautiful to read about, aren't they? Because it's like you can understand why this was a moving moment for like Mukunda, because he's been through this whole experience and just like forgiveness, instant forgiveness. But this divine love is like it also, like, he's giving, Sri Yukteswar gives this divine love, Mukunda receives it and he has tears, but the pure act of giving the divine love, Sri Yukteswar also is moved to tears. So it's quite a lovely divine love to and fro moment.
Yeah, I think I don't know, in German this saying exists. I don't know if it exists in English, but in German you say giving is more divine than taking. And I feel like in this instance, just giving this love to Mukunda affects also Sri Yukteswar. That opens his heart. I think both of their hearts are open in this instance, and they're both able to enjoy this moment that they maneuvered themselves into.
The closest thing that I've experienced to what Sri Yukteswar is experiencing here is when you may have worked quite hard over the years to like kindle a good relationship or to serve someone, and then they, through some act or some words, they acknowledge it, and then you feel like just a real high reverence of divine love, because like your divine love has been like received and is now reciprocated. So then sometimes an acknowledgement of your nature or your divine love is enough to bring you into this kind of mode where both parties are, you know, in pools of tears in their eyes, perhaps.
Yeah, it's really powerful. I think Brother Yogananda gave a talk once about love needs to be manifested, love needs to be expressed, otherwise it doesn't exist. And so if both people feel like this kind of love for each other, but it's never expressed, then it's kind of always under the surface, and then you create this tension, and then a few words can create a powerful kind of outpouring of love. I feel like that's what kind of happened here. They kind of tapped the love fountain here, and then now it's pouring out. And this is also true, like Priyank said, in experiences between people who work closely together or spend a lot of time. Yeah.
And this whole paragraph where Mukunda like describes this, you know, fatherly love, and you know, someone doesn't usually forgive so easily, and then he kind of explains that you're not even slightly vexed and you've been put through great inconvenience, but you're obviously unimpacted and you've just forgiven me unconditionally. It kind of like further enhances the previous paragraph where where Sri Yukteswar is describing, like, you know, I don't have any expectation from you, and no act of yours can impact me. So it's like first Sri Yukteswar says it, and now Mukunda like is like translating it into like everyday speak for us, because those are like Sri Yukteswar's are like really high philosophical ideals, and this is really simple, so we can understand this in terms of fatherly love and expectations from others. And I found a good Gita quote on this topic about expectations and attachments. So this is from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 13. Lauren, would you read it out for us?
This unattachment ensures the devotee of an everlasting, changeless happiness. Those who are engrossed in change delusively expect permanent happiness from the changeable sense world. The wise do not expect to reap everlasting happiness from friends, beloved family, or dear possessions. The forms of loved ones are snatched away by death. Material objects turn out to be meaningless when one becomes used to them, or when, in old age, the senses grow unappreciative and powerless. Concentrate on the immortal spirit through meditation and find there a harvest of eternal, ever-new peace.
Yeah. So, and then there's also, in terms of, there's another quote that's saying in the same chapter later on, which is, thy human right is for activity only, never for the resultant fruit of actions. So this quality of not having expectations or not doing things with result in mind applies to not just our relationships and not just to our possessions and family, etc., but also our meditative and sadhana efforts.
Yeah, should never go for the fruit of actions. That's like, I think that's a recurring theme in the Bhagavad Gita, taking the wisdom path. And this whole forgiveness, I'm not sure if it's forgiveness, because Sri Yukteswar is not really talking about it in this way, because he says there's nothing really to forgive, because all I want is the best for you. So, and then I don't have any expectations. So your action cannot be in opposition to mine. So, but it kind of, like we said, it kind of strengthened the love bond between them. And this really nice sentence by Guruji. He says, I was conscious that the Lord, in the form of my Guru, was expanding the limited orders of my heart to vast reaches of cosmic love, which is very poetic, and he basically means the love in his heart basically expanded, exploded. Cosmic love, I'm not 100% sure what he means by it, but he means, I'm guessing, like divine love, God's love, perfect love, definitely unconditional love.
And he said it was like a blissful wave as well, that this feeling that was engulfing him. And it must have been such a high magnitude of like devotion between the two, because it's almost like Sri Yukteswar like pounced on this opportunity in this moment to like further elevate Mukunda's spiritual progress. And it kind of feels like, because he's put it in this chapter at the very start, it feels like this experience was necessary for him to let go of whatever Mukunda needs to let go of, and experience whatever he needs to experience to have the highest state, highest experience, which is cosmic consciousness and Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which we'll get to a bit later, because this precursor seems like a mandatory experience.
All right, so we had this amazing scene now where Mukunda came back home back into the fold, back with his guru. And remember, Ram Gopal Mazumdar said, your guru will give you experience of samadhi, not I. So it didn't happen right when he came back. So situation cools off a bit. Now it continues with a few mornings later. So it's been back in the hermitage life. And now this is building up to something. So he's like, a few mornings later, I was planning to meditate. And he talked about disobedient thoughts. He said his thoughts, they were scattered like birds before the hunter. I'm not sure if anyone can relate, or if your thoughts are always perfectly aligned when you want to meditate. There, but I've seen this before, I must say. Yeah,
I've seen this before many times, especially when like just after say you've got an hour designated for your meditation, and just after the meditation, you've got something pretty significant to do. And whether it's like leaving for a holiday, or like solving this problem that's needed to be solved in your home, or in your at a center, for example. A good example is like when during the Kriya initiation weekend at the center, there was like a gazillion things to do, and we had to leave at the crack of dawn, but I still wanted to do my meditation, but my mind was on with the stuff that I need to do just straight after, which is akin to what Mukunda was feeling here, i.e. like thoughts were scattered like birds before the hunter. I was just wondering how you guys tackle this, because I find it quite challenging when it does happen. It's usually not to this like such a big scale as this, there's the analogy of the birds before the hunter, but it's enough to frustrate my efforts. So for example, I like to stop the practice, or read Guruji's writings, or do a chant with my harmonium, depending on like the magnitude of this amount of birds that are being scattered, my thoughts. I sometimes persevere, and then like after 20 minutes, 30 minutes, it'll die down, and then I can start my practices like properly, and then enjoy them. And then sometimes I also like skip a technique. Like for example, if I'm doing Hong So, and then it's really not happening for me, but Om technique I find I can do it sometimes a bit easier than the Hong So technique. So then I use that technique, and then it calms it down a little bit. So I was wondering how you guys tackle this common problem.
Well, I was thinking you would bring up the Eightfold Path of Patanjali now, Priyank. how to get in there. But I feel like that's really the key. I talked often about these 2 monks, and the uniform counsel I always got is that if your body is not completely still, then your thoughts won't be completely still. So this, for example, we do 20-20 breathing, or even before that, we do this. We inhale, tense the body, and then exhale and release the tension. This is so powerful. This is really, and sometimes when I feel myself, I'm really meditating on my day yesterday or something, then I'm starting this over again. Because that one of the monks once told me that it's just a waste of time. It's not good for journaling, and it's not good for meditation. So you're just doing neither of the two well here. So, so yeah, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, right? Like I think that's really the key to follow that order, and that helped me a bit. And if I like, because sometimes I just feel like it's evening, I just want to meditate, you just sit down and start techniques, and that rarely ever ends up in a good, it can be good, but it's not always guaranteed, I would say.
Yeah, I like all these suggestions. And funny, Priyank, I actually shared the similar sentiment where I would skip to do the Om technique and then go back to the Hong Sa. So it's funny, we have that similarity there. That really helps. The only thing that I would add is the timing. Try to get the timing right. In my life, I find that if I think, okay, I'll do it after X or Y, often then I trip up over getting into the rhythm of doing tasks or trying to come back to it. It's just the day's already ahead of me. So doing it before the day starts, whatever time your day starts, doing it well before, really helps. So don't get into a good rhythm. I think that's something that took me, with all the changes in my life, it takes a little bit of time to get back into, and it really helps. So yeah, that's the only thing. On the other thing I would add.
I remember Guruji saying how, when a lot of people, when they're meditating, they, have a very short meditation, they give up after 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And he says that's just at the point when things will start to settle down and you'll actually begin to have a meditation. So yeah, if I find that my thoughts are going here and there, much like Mukunda here, then I try and just sit with it and think, okay, well, if I keep going, eventually it's going to calm down. But also I think if it's regularly flying here, there and everywhere, it can be quite useful to have a look at my life and think, okay, well, what's going on? Why are my thoughts here and there? Am I doing the yama and niyamas? Am I following Guruji's advice? Like, are there some areas that I'm not really having much balance with? Or, there's so many factors, isn't there, as to why our thoughts can be so scattered. But it's definitely a common problem, isn't it? And one I find myself often having to battle.
Lauren and I were having a barbecue at one of our friends' house, SRF friends, and we had lots of SRF people there. And we were discussing something similar to this, and where you practice your techniques and where you practice Kriya and things like that. And someone made a really good point, essentially saying like the techniques are not the goal. The goal is God. So like use whatever means works, but don't just like focus on perfecting the techniques. Essentially, work on the after effects and feeling and closeness to God and all those kinds of things. So yeah, so it's a common problem essentially, and we should be innovative to try and solve it.
Yeah, the techniques, they are basically our secret weapons, right? Because without the techniques, we would just be sitting there and trying to sort out our thoughts manually. And I would think that's really difficult, right? So I think before and after doing techniques, usually we feel a lot more uplifted, usually, I would think. So that's definitely true. And yeah, Mukunda, back in the story, he's trying really hard to get his thoughts under control. I don't know if you guys found that comforting, that even an avatar has to go through this, or just us mere mortals. So he went through this, and then, so he's in the middle of this epic battle between his thoughts and his concentration. And then his guru, Sri Yukteswar, he calls for him and says, Mukunda, from the other side of the house. And he was really in the zone right now. So he didn't want to be disturbed. He didn't know what it was about that his master called him, but he wouldn't have any of it. He was like, it's really funny actually, the way he describes it. He says, I felt as rebellious as my thoughts. He said, Master always urges me to meditate, and now he shouldn't disturb me now that I'm trying. I found it funny, but also relatable. I think sometimes you are in those moods where you, I don't know if it's the ego that's taking over, but you definitely feel like you're doing something very important, and whatever it is can wait. I'm in the middle of this now. But then he summoned him again, and he says, I remained obstinately silent. And I don't know, I found that really funny. And then he says, Sir, I'm meditating, I shouted protestingly. And then Sri Yukteswar goes, I know how you are meditating, with your mind distributed like leaves in a storm. Come here to me. So it's not only that he can't fend off his guru. He even has a guru who is basically there with him, meditating and experiencing everything he is. So he can't really hide his situation from him. You know, he could have said, oh, I had the greatest meditation, Guruji, but his guru knew everything already.
Shouldn't Sri Yukteswar actually be allowed to? Only hear chaos behind me. Shouldn't my nephew came into the shot just now. Shouldn't Sri Yukteswar be allowed to intervene and interject whenever he feels like it? Because Mukunda's kind of a bit disturbed by this whole interruption. Like, I've been through this, for example, my mum calling me or my wife calling me, and I'm like, oh, they know I'm meditating. Well, exactly what Mukunda's feeling. But a guru is not the same, right? They kind of know, and especially Sri Yukteswar knows exactly how Mukunda is progressing on the path and what's obstructing him, etc. So it's a bit surprising that Mukunda is being so obstinate with his reaction.
I just find this whole interaction so funny, but also so sweet. There he is struggling, and Sri Yukteswar knows it, and he's trying to help him. But even so, he's like, "No, I'm trying to meditate. Don't call me." And we know what's about to happen, right? And the gift that's about to be bestowed upon him. And I don't know, sometimes I feel like it's kind of a mirror reflection of what goes on sometimes in our lives. Like, we think we should be doing one thing, or things should be going one way, and it feels like Guruji and God and life is pulling us in another, and we go, yeah, but I'm doing this thing, and then actually they're trying to get the best for us. It's kind of trusting when we hear a call or some type of thing, but actually, yeah, they know better, and they always want for our best, don't they?
Yeah, it's funny the way Sri Yukteswar kind of calls him out of his meditation and then tells him to come there. Were you guys ever thinking Sri Yukteswar could have just appeared in the middle of his meditation and quieted the storm or something, and then they could have had an experience together like this.
It's cool. It's cool how Sri Yukteswar described it. I know how you're meditating, like leaves scattered leaves in the storm, distributed leaves in the storm. And Mukunda describes it as birds scattering before the hunter. It's quite interesting comparison, isn't it? Because obviously this Mukunda's he's kind of describing the hunter as his like restless mind, like the monkey mind, and his thoughts, all those kind of things. And Mukunda and Sri Yukteswar is saying that his whole mind is like a chaotic, storm. Just as like my room here became quite chaotic when my two nephews came back from their adventure to the park a little bit earlier than I expected.
Nice. Yeah, and then Guruji, he's being summoned. He's being called over to that balcony, and he says, "Thwarted and exposed, I made my way sadly to his side." Probably not knowing what is going to come, probably not knowing that this chapter is called Experience in Cosmic Consciousness. So, but we'll see in the next episode how this continues. But I think we all kind of know what will happen. So stay tuned for the next chapter. Do we have let's Priyanka, are you gonna give us a little preview of the next episode?
Oh, you're on mute, Priyanka.
Yes, please, Lauren, before we start.
But before we do, Mike, you found a reading, didn't you, about meditation from Man's Eternal Quest? And I thought it was really lovely. And if you'd still like to, we could read it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually gonna skip it because we have gone past that part. But yeah, let's read it out. It's actually kind of a good explanation of how persistence on the meditation path can get us to where we want to be. Chris?
Sure. Making religion scientific. The experiences I've told you about are scientifically attainable. If you follow the spiritual laws, the result is certain. If the result doesn't come, find fault with your effort. Intensity in all your religious practices is the only way.
Those who don't meditate regularly and deeply are restless whenever they do meditate and give up after a short effort. But if you make a greater effort day by day, the ability to go deep will come. I don't have to make any effort now. The whole world is gone instantly when I close my eyes and gaze into the Christ center. And I used to sit for hours trying to forget the body and the thoughts. I came to a point where I thought it was no use.
But I saw it was my fault. Between the restless thoughts and God, there is a wall. The ordinary person doesn't try, so he never gets over that wall. But the spiritual fighter goes on. When the mind becomes still, you are in the kingdom of the infinite. Those who have spent too much time on foolish things remain fruitlessly knocking outside.
Yeah. Well, we know Guruji overcame all those walls, and it's even nicer if you have a guru sitting on the balcony who is going to help you jump over that wall. That's what we're going to see in the next episode.
Yes, the next episode. So this is really now the prelude to the Samadhi experience, because Sri Yukteswar has called him and is essentially going to grant him this wonderful experience. But there's also some quite interesting dialogue just before he grants it, and some more examples of like unconditional love, like how Sri Yukteswar addresses him. And then there's also like how Sri Yukteswar actually physically grants him the experience, and how that physical translates to the spiritual, which we'll discuss. The thuds, he pokes him on the chest essentially, And Mukunda then describes this lovely experience, so the highest experience that you can have. And he kind of disconnects and reconnects to his ultimate like nature. And then he expands. He's like, so he's like really described all these experiences in like phases, so we can kind of grasp it. And then he describes how like he's connected to God and how this experience has allowed him to transcend all his limitations. So it's a really, really wonderful section of the description of the Samadhi experience. And of course it does go on. We'll only cover half of it next time.
Can't wait. Yeah. So I think this wraps up the first part of chapter 14. Thank you to all the listeners and the viewers on YouTube. Thank you to the whole crew, and Jai Guru.
Very good.
Jai Guru.